Khenpo is a highly respected professor at the renowned Larunga Five Sciences Buddhist Academy. The term Khenpo refers to a professor, specifically a senior Buddhist teacher. That's essentially what it means. And today, he has prepared for us a very thought-provoking lecture on Buddhism's perspective on human nature and education, which are the topics that he will be talking about today. Khenpo has also conducted a rather comprehensive and in-depth research on Tibetan Buddhism. In this area, he has not only engaged in personal practice, but has also traveled widely to give lectures and share his insights. So we are very pleased to have him here, especially in this beautiful golden autumn season. We are honored to welcome him to our School of Marxism at Hunan University. Khenpo will be delivering a wonderful and inspiring lecture for us all. Let us all give him a very warm and enthusiastic welcome as we begin.
Earlier today, I had an engaging discussion with teachers and PhD, as well as postgraduate students from the Marxism School at Hunan University. It's a great opportunity to learn and share knowledge together. So I hope we can study and support each other along this path. As for the main topic of our collaborative study together today, in this session, it's about Buddhism's exploration of human nature. So we'll be discussing and exchanging ideas with each other around this subject. Regarding such a topic, I think we should first make an effort to try to understand it through the lens and perspective of our traditional culture's ideas. And as for the method of understanding, here is my personal view. Nowadays, people's mindsets and attitudes in society are actually very open and accepting. With such an open and inquisitive mindset, how are we able to explore and to understand human nature and grasp the nature or essence of human beings? I believe that to understand human nature, we should first take a look at the traditional culture and see how different people have viewed it in the past. If we are to understand traditional culture, we can look at the deep and ancient culture of Han China, as well as the traditions of Tibetan Buddhism. We can explore human nature in these two cultures. First, let's take a look at the traditional culture of Han China. As everyone knows, during the spring and autumn and warring states periods, there are many different theories and ideas. At that time, there were various differing views on human nature. For example, there was a group of rather renowned and respected scholars, notably led by Gaozi, who believed human nature is not inherently good or evil. In other words, they thought that human nature does not have a fixed character by itself. Later, due to various causes and conditions, just like water can flow east or west, in the end, it can become good or it can become evil. This is one argument. Then there is also the later view of Shunzi. Different from the previous argument, Shunzi believed that human nature is at its core inherently evil. He thought that Yao, Shun, Yu were the same as Jeju, in the sense that the nature of a gentleman is the same as a petty person. Although human nature is first evil, through acquired education and environment, people can occasionally become good. Then, during the Han Dynasty, there were influential thinkers, led in particular by Yang Xiong, who believed that human nature is actually mixed. It's a combination of good and evil. It's just that cultivating goodness makes one a good person, while cultivating evil makes one an evil person. They believe that the human nature is inherently mixed. In fact, these three theories or arguments, from our perspective of academia, or when analyzed through philosophical or religious reasoning, they're not very reasonable. But why are they not reasonable? The first theory claims that humans have no inherent nature, using water as a metaphor. But there's a logical fallacy in this statement. If humans have no inherent nature, how can you use water as a metaphor? Water clearly exists. Also, the metaphor is unreasonable too, because he uses water's direction as an analogy for the lack of an inherent nature. The water flowing east or west is a matter of direction, not its nature. But our exploration of human nature is like how we see the nature of fire is hot and the nature of water is wet. Using direction as metaphor for inherent nature is therefore unreasonable. The second theory is also unreasonable because it claims that human nature is first evil, but then later becomes good. We often say a river may change its course, but a person's nature is hard to change. In other words, if human nature is inherently one thing, then it is not possible for it to change into something else. If it truly is evil, then how could it possibly ever become good? It would be impossible to turn good. If the nature of human beings is really evil in its existing, then no matter how much education or positive influence it receives, it would still be impossible for it to ever become good. If you think the third statement is the most accurate, that it's mixed, then how is this mixture defined? Are good and evil completely blended together, like water and milk? Or are they entirely separate? If they are separate, then in fact there is no mixture at all. The area between them still marks a line of their separation. If the two are truly fused into one, then how can someone be a coexistence of the mutually exclusive good and bad? At the moment when someone becomes good, what then happens to the component of their nature that is evil? And when they turn bad, where could their good still exist, given that it is the exact same as their bad? So through these three analysis of the different theories argued on human nature, what can we discover? That the theories of human nature being neutral, bad, and mixed are all actually unreasonable. So what is the reasonable perspective? As opposed to them, the Confucian viewpoint at the time was quite reliable. What is the Confucian viewpoint then? Represented by Mencius, they said, since the very beginning, human nature is fundamentally good. In other words, the nature of human beings is good, but later on, although their natures are much the same, habitual tendencies can create wide differences and variations. If they are not taught positively, their nature can be misled. They can be led astray. As stated in the three-character classic, our hearts are originally good, but later, due to environmental factors and various other reasons, the human heart can be tainted by evil habitual tendencies. Moreover, without the guidance of education, it is indeed very likely that people's hearts over time will gradually drift far away from their original inherent goodness. It's also because of knowing humans' good nature that Mencius later said, in fact, we humans inherently possess the qualities of benevolence, righteousness, propriety, and wisdom. The feeling of compassion towards others is connotated by the word benevolence, and the sense of shame and dislike towards misdeeds is connotated by righteousness. The feeling of respect is connotated by propriety. And finally, the distinguishing mind between right and wrong is connotated by the quality of wisdom. In fact, benevolence, righteousness, propriety, and wisdom are, as a matter of principle, not instilled from the outside. They are not brought in from external sources. Mencius quote, "They are inherent in me" means that humans naturally possess these qualities within their inner selves. From his theory, we can actually think of it this way. The feeling of compassion, as Buddhism describes it, the heart of mercy, pity, loving kindness, and great compassion, everyone has it. When we see someone pitiful, we're able to spontaneously feel a sense of compassion toward them. On the other hand, we also have a sense of shame, aversion to evil, feeling of remorse. Although it seems that some people nowadays lack a sense of shame, the majority of them, whether it's in the way they dress, the way they speak, or their actions, there's a sense of knowing shame and feeling guilty. We also have a sense of respect toward those above us, and a sense of filial piety toward our parents. All of these are manifestations of a respectful heart. Finally, when it comes to any issues of right and wrong in the world, we have the ability to distinguish the good from the bad. These are what is meant by benevolence, righteousness, propriety, and wisdom. These kinds of virtues. In fact, they are not something that is imposed on us by external causes and conditions. Rather, we should say that they inherently exist within us. And this is extremely important. Many people here today, and some of you may already know, that we humans have actually gone through many previous lifetimes of births and deaths to arrive at today. Some of us today, maybe because of your education, upbringing, or what you've learned, may not know this and might think humans are just a product of matter, or that people just simply happen to come into this world by mere chance. If you haven't done prior research, it's possible for you to think that way. But regardless of that, the human nature that we commonly refer to is in fact inherently good and pure. Then, does Mencius's statement have anything in common with what Buddhism teaches? There are some similarities. How does Buddhism explain this? Buddhism says that all beings have Buddha nature, the Tathagata Garbha, yet it's obscured by adventitious defilements, so its nature cannot manifest. This means that each one of us, every sentient being, has a good and pure heart by nature. But due to various external defilements, it becomes polluted and cannot manifest as it truly is. This is simply Buddhism's temporary description of human nature. From this perspective, we acknowledge that human nature is good. But what is the ultimate description? It is somewhat similar to Taoism. Taoism also speaks of a mind that's free from contention and desire. And in fact, human nature is a fundamental essence that has neither contention, nor desire, nor anything to seek. But the teachings of Buddhism delves even deeper into this. Whether it is our original nature or our present nature, it's actually beyond good, evil, existence, non-existence, right or wrong, as well as all conceptual elaborations, attachments, and extremes. It is entirely free from all of these. Through the analysis of modern scientific theories, we are also able to fully understand it. Some of you here may not have paid particular attention to the theories and teachings of Buddhism, but if you do try to learn more about it, just now when I was talking with a few teachers, I also mentioned this. I said that some aspects of Buddhism, especially the ideas of Madhyamaka, Tathagata Garbha, and the debate system, these can be compared with the highest forms of reasoning in modern society, and can be speculated upon in the same way. After you've learned more about them, you will discover their remarkable strengths. So, as I said, from the ultimate perspective of Buddhism, it is important to note that what we refer to as human nature, or our true nature, is beyond all language, thought, and analysis. In its very essence, it completely transcends everything. So, how exactly can we truly experience it, or perhaps even begin to understand it? In fact, it's not to say that everything is entirely inconceivable. It is actually possible for us to have some understanding and realization of it, but this is at a very advanced level. So at this point in time, we won't be discussing it. For the time being, let's just focus on the aspect of how human nature is inherently good. You may have a question. If good is the nature, does that mean it can never turn into evil? When I refuted Shunzi's argument earlier, could that criticism actually apply to myself as well? It'd be contradictory. Is there also a fallacy in the argument that the human nature is good? No, because the goodness in human nature that we are talking about here can appear to be in a different form as it is covered by temporary defilements. This phenomenon is reasonable, and it's reasonable because I don't know if you had heard of this famous doctor called Brian Weiss, who had written a very celebrated book, which is titled Many Lives, Many Masters. He also wrote another book called Messages from the Masters, which I have read in the past. In this book, he described a very good analogy for the goodness of human nature, which enunciates how all of us humans are equal and the same. One section of the book asks, if the inherent nature of human beings is really good and considered equal and the same, then why is it that Some people are very healthy, some have great physique, some are very intelligent, while some other people aren't good at anything and are poor, unattractive, in poor health, and so on. Where do these differences come from? How can we say people are equal and good by nature? So he gave an example. A rainbow-colored diamond does not fail to shine with colors of the rainbow, but if this diamond gets covered by outer layers of dirt and debris, by the adventitious defilements, its original rainbow brilliance not only becomes invisible, but it also appears dull and lifeless. Depending on how it's covered, it can even show different appearances on the outside, especially when it comes to the surface. But if we clean and polish away all the external dust and overlay, then the true nature of the diamond, its rainbow light, will be able to naturally shine forth. In fact, everyone here today has a compassionate side and a wise side in their true nature, as well as all kinds of positive forces and qualities. However, due to acquired factors like education, environment, relationships, and so on, our nature is covered by the obstacles of various causes and conditions. And as a result, some people become very ignorant, some are lost and confused, and some are quite unsuccessful. But if we truly develop each person's wisdom and compassion, then the idea that human nature is fundamentally good is provable. This point was also recognized by the famous Tang Dynasty Emperor Li Shimin. He once conducted an experiment, which is also a particularly well-known and true story in Chinese history. So what is this story? Once, when he was in power, his subordinates had around 390 prisoners in jail who were about to be sentenced to death, all awaiting their sentences. But just as they were about to be sentenced to death, many of the prisoners pleaded with him in tears. They said that their last wish before leaving this world was whether they could have one final reunion with their wives, children, and families. If they could have just one reunion, they promised whatever orders or commands he chose to give them without hesitation. Li Shimin felt compassion for them, on the one hand. On the other hand, there were also debates at the time about whether human nature is good or evil. So in order to test this out himself, since society back then was not as easy to get around or communicate as today, he asked for a certain point in time for all the prisoners of the country in each area of their homelands to be assembled in one place. At that time, he decided to let all the prisoners who were about to be executed return home. He granted them a 9-month leave, requiring them to return at the end of those 9 months. As he did this, some of his ministers became quite concerned. They said, if you simply let these criminals go home, not a single one will come back. This is not a good idea. But Li Shimin insisted on his own unwavering view and allowed all the prisoners to leave. All 390 people could return home. And eventually, after 9 months, no one ran away. All of them conscientiously returned, though I thought this would be very different nowadays. If you release 390 people now, it's possible they would all run away. This may have something to do with the cunning and untrustworthiness of many people today. But back then, it truly was a very famous experiment in history. It led him to pardon all 390 prisoners from the death penalty. None were executed. On the other hand, this also served as proof that each of us, if we are given a comprehensive and positive education of various circumstances and are instilled with good moral values and ideas, then our true nature can be said to be good, not evil. No matter how grave a crime one has committed, no matter how wicked a person may be, in reality, they still have a kind and compassionate side, and should also have a bright side as well. So I think for each one of us that are sitting here today, we should strive to bring out the full potential that is inherently present in our human nature. We need to tap into this ability. Whether you are a student or not, in your own environments, right now, we really need to develop this power of goodness in our nature. Because in the current society that we live in, the material world around us is unlike any other era of the past. This era has undergone some significant changes, especially in the external progress. But our inner world, you could say, is at its lowest point. I think the 21st century is the most advanced era so far for humanity in terms of material development. But when it comes to our inner lives, humanity might be at its lowest. Why is that? Because nowadays, many people in the world lack a sense of fulfillment and happiness in their daily lives. Regardless of whether it's in our casual conversations or actions, everyone is feeling exhausted, bitter, stressed, sad, and frustrated. They can be described with many words. On the other hand, everyone's positive feelings, such as happiness, joy, and gratitude, are gradually decreasing in our words and actions. Especially nowadays, there are a lot of news and media reports that cover many negative information, which influences most of what we hear and see, and it's only increasing. At times like this, although the nature of human beings are originally good, due to the influence of their environment, it's very likely that little by little, over time, they start to pick up a lot of bad behaviors. So now, at this point in time, we really need to consistently promote what people nowadays commonly refer to as positive energy. And this positive energy is what Buddhism refers to as goodness. I think goodness and positive energy are the same. Negative energy, on the other hand, is what we've been calling evil or bad in Buddhism. They are exactly the same. So what is positive energy? I once read the works of Dale Carnegie. He could be considered as one of the pioneers of the concept of positive energy. He was also, indeed, a very successful master. So what did he say about positive energy? He said that anything that gives people a sense of motivation, enthusiasm, hope, and inspiration for pursuing success, anything that makes our lives more complete and happy, all such forces and emotions are called positive energy. That was his explanation of positive energy. In other words, in our daily lives, we should be optimistic, happy, compassionate, and wise. We should have courage and be proactive. These kinds of thoughts and actions that pursue positive aspects are what we call positive energy. Buddhism also talks about goodness, which includes the three aspects of body, speech, and mind. For example, with our speech, we should speak truthful words. With our body, we should not take actions in stealing or killing. And in our minds, we should not be overly greedy or angry, but instead develop wisdom and so on. All of these can be seen as valuable forms of positive energy, and we should continuously make an effort to cultivate and enhance them throughout our daily lives. I think there are several ways to enhance our positive energy. First of all, relying on ourselves independently is very important. In our daily lives, as individuals, we need to keep on learning and continuously educate ourselves. At any time and in any environment, we must maintain a sense of dissatisfaction towards our knowledge. While it's good to be content about material things, when it comes to learning, we should never be satisfied. Many college students and teachers, when finishing their studies, they're content and stop learning. But that isn't for the best. Learning is endless, and that's how it should be. In our daily lives, we should adjust our mindsets and see things in an optimistic light. We need to strive to be people who are positive and motivated. Otherwise, some of us may face various issues that are actually linked to our own negative mindsets. The so-called positive energy, on the one hand, is something that can be enhanced within ourselves from our own perspective. You see, a pessimistic person would judge things in a completely different way compared to a person who is optimistic. For example, in face of a slightly cold weather, an optimistic person would see the cold as something refreshing and comfortable. They would feel and describe things positively. Whereas a pessimist would say, the weather is so cold today. It's so unbearable. Life sucks. Similarly, when they see half a glass of water on the table, an optimistic person might think to themselves, hey, There's still half a glass of water left for me to enjoy. They think of it as a good thing. But a pessimistic person, on the other hand, would be upset that half of the water was already gone, thinking it may not be enough. Therefore, our mindset towards adversities is very, in particular, out of the quotients that young people value nowadays, such as IQ, EQ, and AQ, the power of AQ, the ability to face adversity, is absolutely necessary when encountering difficulties. Because schools nowadays often tend to lack education in this area, when students and also teachers and adults encounter even a very trivial adversity in life, something not even that bad, they wouldn't be able to handle it, and instead they may choose to take some very unwise actions, which is very irrational. So for us personally, we should promote positive energy, things that are true and kind, and be courageous. However, this kind of courage doesn't necessarily mean you have to rush headlong into the army of the enemy. But what we need to do is to understand the truth, which is that in such a beautiful and vast world, the small adversities that I encounter are actually not as painful as one would believe. There are still numerous other people in this world who are suffering much more than we are. Often, I see a lot of college students who seem to feel a lot of pressure and pain in their lives. Before they were accepted into college, they feel that once they got in, they'll live life like heaven. But after entering college, there are still many issues. In fact, if you're unsatisfied in life, things will always be like this. After you find a job, you won't be satisfied with your job. Finding a family, you won't be satisfied either. Everything becomes a source of suffering. If this continues, the lives that we live could be filled with negative energy. There is no sense of satisfaction or happiness, not a single joyful moment. That's a misguided way of seeing things. Therefore, one way for us to cultivate positive energy is through ourselves. There is also another way, which is to rely on others around us and to depend on external conditions. Relying on the outer environment and the support of our friends to cultivate positive energy is also very necessary. Nowadays, the main reason why some people commit crimes and their behavior keeps deteriorating is mostly because of the influence of their environment and friends. In Buddhism, we say, by having good friends, our merits would rise like a waxing moon. But if we have bad friends, then our original compassion, wisdom, and so on will all completely disappear because of that. Gradually, they will fade away. This is what is said in Buddhism. Nowadays, many young people may not understand this and spend all day on the internet engaging in useless and dull things that are harmful to themselves. They even constantly fill their minds with things that are violent and rather extreme ideas. They end up only having a soulless human shell. They lose meaning to their families and can't help society. This is terrifying for many young people. Those of us sitting here should observe this with a very meticulous wisdom that is unbiased and thoughtful. On one hand, we can see that the internet has shortened the distance between the world. Any kind of information we want, we can basically get through the internet. This is a very good tool, but it also has its downsides. For example, some people spend all their time, day and night, immersed in it. As they become more absorbed, they enter an increasingly illusory world. And in the end, they lose interest in anything meaningful at work or at home. It can even get to a point where some lose the desire and motivation for eating. So ideally, we should also rely on a positive force from the outside world. As they say, you're the company you keep. Right now, what we truly need is a sincere force and wisdom to help uplift and elevate ourselves. This is extremely important. In Buddhism, there's a sutra called the Essential Collection of All Dharmas, which says, the goodness that we know is like a flower. No matter where a fresh flower is, it emits a fragrant scent. Similarly, no matter in which environment, goodness can always bring a sense of happiness to the people around. There is another Buddhist scripture called the Maharatna Kutta Sutra, which says, Doing good always brings a deep sense of peace and true happiness. A person who does good deeds is a person who would always be immersed in happiness. Because doing good is joyful. This is what is truly called positive energy. I really hope that many of us can understand from a positive perspective, whether it is in Buddhism or in Confucian thought, all the important forces, anything that can genuinely bring lasting happiness and a sense of well-being to both our body and mind, not just for ourselves, but also for others around us. Such behavior and education are now indispensable in any environment. If we lack this kind of education, it would become very difficult for us in life. What we need right now is a positive energy that comes from the external world. What is such positive energy? It can be relying on good friends. Nowadays, people steal and spread all kinds of negative information, and some especially like to associate with them. If you meet such people and spend time with them, there is a saying in Tibetan, it takes 3 years to improve, but only 1 day to regress. To truly improve oneself may take 3 full years of consistent effort, but falling behind can happen in just a single day. Or the power of pulling one person down is greater than lifting 100 people up. We have this saying, and in fact, the words of the ancients are very meaningful. They said that elevating just one person's behavior may be difficult even for the might of 100 people. But when it comes to dragging down, just one person's actions can bring you down completely. So, for students, this is actually a period of transition and also a very important and critical time for shaping our thinking. In the schools that I see today, teachers don't really supervise, and students aren't really like those in the US. In the US, it isn't as difficult to get into college, but in the end, it's hard for students to actually get their diploma and graduate. Because of this, all the students in the school would study diligently, with great dedication, day and night. They don't usually chat or go online. You don't tend to see students who are bored or chatting in most universities there. But for many of our students, after entering university now, a lot of their time is spent on things that are meaningless. On top of that, due to various aspects of your physical development, your age, and your mindset as well, everything gets complicated. So those who truly seek knowledge can be said as very few. In fact, the amount of time that we have available when we're in our youth is really valuable and extremely precious to us. It's very important to have a kind of atmosphere where people have eagerness for learning. This is the positive energy that I'm talking about, fulfilled by external factors. This is quite necessary. Thirdly, when it comes to our positive and uplifting energy in our daily lives, it's best to have a kind of faith that supports us through challenges. The positive energy that comes from faith is absolutely essential. Why is that? Faith comes in many forms, like in material things or in religion. But what I'm referring to here is religious faith. It plays a significant role in addressing many of the spiritual issues we encounter in life. When humans come into this world, is it true that all the problems we'll encounter in life are material ones? Not necessarily. Most of them are actually mental or spiritual. When it comes to spiritual issues, religions that have existed for thousands of years continue to play a significant and rather effective role. Especially when it comes to the process of carefully analyzing some of the major issues concerning our minds or souls, religion probably has a much broader view, as it stands at the highest vantage point. It has the most thorough analysis and often delves the deepest. By comparison, many theories and schools of thought do not have a long history. Why is it that there are so many religions in the world today, and their ideas remain so vibrant, so relevant, and so widely embraced, even in this day and age? It is because they have value and meaning for existence, just like Tibetan Buddhism. Recently, some scholars from the BBC in the UK asked me, why there is at present such a strong wave of enthusiasm and growing interest in Tibetan Buddhism across China. I said, in fact, this has existed here since a long time ago. Recently, many people, having been pressured and confused in heart, have simply found a spiritual home. That's how I see it. It's not like some of the products we see on the market nowadays, which may be popular for a few days and then suddenly decline. We should say that the existence, as well as the true significance and importance of religion, is something that each of us as individuals may at some point have to thoughtfully and personally explore. Speaking of religion, just now I conversed with some of the teachers here at the university, and during our conversation, I also asked, does your school of Marxism study Marx's views on religion? Because I'm quite interested in this area. When I was a student, I studied Marx dialectical materialism, like moral theory, as well as a bit of some of his other philosophical doctrines. After I became a monk, I had also done some examination and analysis on Marx's perspective on religion. Actually, his views on religion, which I don't need to explain as you've done deeper research. However, when I analyzed it from my own perspective, some of the Marxist ideas that are being taught now have in fact been somewhat altered and changed to a certain extent when compared to the original theories and ideas he initially held. They are not really the raw, original ideas anymore. A few months ago, I visited the Max Planck Institute and University of Göttingen in Germany. There are several professors. At first they said, "Your atheistic views are problematic in so-and-so ways." I said, some of our views in China actually come from the Marxist ideas of Germany. Then they said these were not their ideas at all. So we debated for a while. On the other hand, we also talked for a long time, with both sides speaking at rather great length. And in the end, I also realized, to be honest, that Marx's original ideas, by the time they got here, have undergone some changes. Why do I say that? Because when Marx was just 6 years old, he formally became a member of the Christian faith and was baptized at a local church in his community. When a child joins the church, there is a special ceremony to wash away original sin. He was baptized at the age of 6 as a young boy. Later, he got married, and his marriage ceremony was also held at the church. Many analysts believe that although he never explicitly declared himself to be a believer, in reality, he was never expelled from the church, nor did he leave it. Although, according to what we know and have learned from various sources in Germany, his later life, as far as we are able to determine, was rather tragic and unfortunate. He met Engels when he was 25 years old. Later, because of some of his theories and beliefs, he was expelled from Germany and could no longer stay there. Then, after making the move from Germany to Belgium, he was eventually expelled by the Belgian authorities as well. So he went to France, but then France wouldn't let him stay and expelled him again. So he fled to England. During those years in England, although it was the hardest period of his life, as all 3 of his 4 children died in that period, it was also during that time that he wrote Das Kapital, a critique of political economy, as was his wish after his death. Engels also couldn't fulfill many of his last wishes. What I was wanting to say just then is that the main idea of Marx's view on religion, he has a rather famous saying which is often quoted and widely recognized. He stated, "Religion is the opium of the people." When he said this, what he actually meant was not exactly as people often interpret it. There's a context for that statement. But later on, by the time of Lenin, because Marx's previous statement actually comes from a contribution to a critique of Hegel's philosophy of right, that's where he said it. But when it came to Lenin, he added a new word to that phrase. Religion is the opium that numbs the people. Why did Lenin say this at the time? The main reason for that was that at that particular time in history, the Orthodox Church was in fact actively collaborating and working together with various counter-revolutionaries. They resisted Lenin's radical revolution. During the Russian October Revolution, Lenin actively sought to find a way to overthrow and suppress them. For political purposes, as a tool, he added the word "numbs" at that particular time. He regarded religion as a means used by the exploiting class and also as a tool to oppress the people. This is how he put it. But after the October Revolution came to an end, in fact, even within Lenin's own party, there was actually no rule that believers could not join his party. Later on, things went back to the way they were like before. And yet, during our studies here, it seems that religion is seen in a way as some kind of mutation, as if it has a numbing, almost anesthetizing effect on people. And why is that? Because at that time, the European perspective was different from ours. For them, so-called opium was a very expensive medicine. Moreover, it was a kind of spiritual support and comfort for people in suffering. It attracted people and was habit-forming, but the statement wasn't simply attacking religion. His own view was simply that religion was indeed a very powerful force for people. Because in other works by Marx, he said that so-called religion is the wisdom of the afterlife. He actually described religion as the theory of the world beyond. In his other works, we can see that there were many, many positive descriptions on religion. Here, for us, historically, because of the Opium War, which took place approximately in the year 1840, people came to believe that opium was a poisonous drug that numbs people. Our perspective here was to judge the simile of opium as something harmful. As a result, many young people, including some that I know, there are many misunderstandings, and views about religion often come from this reason, as they saw the statement in isolation. However, as everyone's quite familiar with this knowledge, Marx's true religious thought originated in Germany. Later, however, through Russia, the Soviet Union, and its collapse, there was a disillusionment. Even the current Russian president and others believe in religion. I saw just the day before yesterday that Putin was named the most influential person in the world. Last year it was President Obama, and this year it was considered to be him. He is actually an adherent of the Orthodox Church, and the Orthodox Church is the denomination of Christianity. For the Soviet Union, it became their state religion very early on. In fact, Lenin's view on religion at the time was shaped by certain political necessities. He made certain significant and deliberate changes to harden the original principles of Marxist thought. So even now, I think many of our ideas, such as if you are to believe that Marxist thought is entirely critical of religion, I used to also discuss this with teachers while studying at Teachers College regarding some views in dialectical materialism and Marxism. At the time, although I didn't really understand some of the ideas in Western European countries, I thought as Marxist principles differ from other ideologies, in fact, the highest realm of humanity, his philosophical and ideological judgments are very precise. He probably wouldn't actually deny religion having held these existing principles. And indeed, this is what I've realized. All of us here also sincerely hope for a positive and uplifting religious outlook, and such a religious thought would carry a positive and meaningful significance for our lives and existence. Therefore, I think that now, in this very open 21st century, at this time, our thinking needs reform, innovation, and an overall elevation. If we cling to our original way of thinking and stay forever in a small frame using the same mindset, Our material world may connect with others and develop, but as for our thinking, if we always confine ourselves within a self-imposed web, we might not necessarily accept much of the valuable knowledge that is in the world. What I especially sensed is that nowadays, many young people would scoff when they hear something to do with religion. They would say, that's just superstition. That's merely the leftover dross of old societal thinking and outdated beliefs from the past and so on, dismissing it as irrelevant. Using a kind of derogatory tone, they brush it aside. Honestly, it's not really scientific. Because many scientists, including Einstein and Newton, as well as many modern scientists, have a fair-minded attitude toward religion. Moreover, religion can indeed bring significant benefits to their political parties and to their personal lives. That's why many political parties and ruling parties around the world regard religion as one of the very best, most effective and influential ways to attract people. If that's the case, then all armed forces become very strong and highly beneficial. Many of you here today, if we have some ideological conflicts or differences, we can also have open discussions. I especially hope that we can approach and analyze knowledge with an open, free, and inclusive mindset. In the process of analyzing knowledge, we should focus on facts. Decisions like these should not be made based on our own religious beliefs or on any rigid and dogmatic views that we personally hold, as it is important to remain fair and objective. Insisting on our opinions is unnecessary. In summary, human nature should be fundamentally good. This kind of goodness is expressed in Buddhism with the saying, abstain from all evil, do all good, and purify one's mind. This is the teaching of all Buddhas. Abstain from all evil essentially means not to engage in actions that carry negative energy. Practice all good means we should aim to boost positive energy. The most crucial aspect of positive and negative energy is to purify the mind. This is the essence of Buddhist thought. I believe that this kind of thinking is especially suitable for today's society. It is an indispensable part of the culture and values we advocate today. Therefore, with respect to the judgment of good or evil as fundamental nature of humanity, as well as the perspectives and viewpoints held by Marxism regarding the concept and role of religion in society, if you have any thoughts, feel free to speak your mind openly. I'm just sharing these ideas to spark discussion. I haven't really conducted deep research or analysis on this topic. These are just my own personal views and thoughts, which I am sincerely and honestly sharing with everyone here. Next, let's see if there is anything you'd like to say. Any topics, we can discuss them together.